Over to you, Alia.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you for coming. If I can ask the panelists to please come up on the stage. If I can please have the presentation on the screen, please. Thank you. So my name's Alia Khan. I'm the founder and chairwoman of the Islamic Fashion and Design Council. And we have a platform where we build initiatives and opportunities and further develop the industry and the industry players. And of course, we always bear in mind that there's a valuable consumer on the other end when we come up with our initiatives. So every community has a characteristic that it's known for. And in Islam, that characteristic is modesty. And I think we can all relate to that in some way or another. Khalil Gibran had said, to understand how great a person is, look not at what he has already achieved, but at what more he aspires to do. And Muchia Prada said, what you wear is how you present yourself to the world, especially today when human contact goes so fast. Fashion is an instant language. So a lot of what we aspire to do shows in how we communicate through our sense of style, what we choose to wear, the colors, the fabrics, all that has a language in and of itself. And character shines through fashion. Our impression of some of the most iconic figures in the world is embedded in our minds forever, largely due to their fashion sense. And I think normally when we meet people, that's usually what sticks with us, is the presentation. Presentation sometimes is everything as far as first impressions are concerned. And then fashion psychologists, yes, there are such a thing as fashion psychologists, say that the biggest purpose of our choice in what we wear is to represent who we are. Our character is depicted in our choices. And it is true about what they say about dressing the way you feel. Even when we cover, we have certain parameters that we can live within. For modesty, yes, but elegance as well. And that's depicted in many ways. So one of the things that we do at the Islamic Fashion and Design Council is we do a lot of training programs. We motivate our members to be their best, to create their own legend. And so in our training programs, we do exercises such as this one that's on the screen right now, where we ask them to take their age today at 2015, and we ask them to build it up every 10 years. So take your age today, if you will, at 2015, if you work with me on this, and add every 10 years to your age until 2085. Now what happens is some people kind of stop after 30 years or 40 years or even 50 years and say, what's the point? That's as far as I'm gonna go. And our point is that your vision must be beyond your lifetime in order for it to remain an impact on your society. And if you look at some of the greatest people and the legends, or what we may maybe consider our own legends in history, you will see that their vision was always beyond their lifetime, and it was beyond themselves. In fact, your vision should not really be about you. And that's something that we make our trainees think about before they enter that big world of fashion, design, or even business. And when you talk about legends, we look at some of the iconic figures from the mainstream fashion industry, and we really hope to build such iconic figures in the modest industry, and we believe there's tremendous potential for that. So Coco Chanel is a great visionary. Her vision was beyond her lifetime. She saw less is more value to fashion, which has continued to inspire designers long after her death. And today, Chanel remains the epitome of timeless beauty with no end in sight. And of course, you can't forget that she did leave us with 4 iconic must-haves: the black dress, the handbag, the jacket, and the perfume. And that's really what it's about. It's about a vision that gets so embodied in the product that that in and of itself does speak its own language. And the potential of the IFASH designers, the Islamic fashion designers, is tremendous. We believe that not only can we have our own future Coco Chanels and Armanis, in fact, we can probably have something more meaningful than that. With all due respect to mainstream fashion, there's a lot more meaning and value behind what our designers do. And our designers, we have members over 5,000 around the world, and about 1/3 of them are designers that hail from over 40 countries, and it's growing. So we do have a little bit of a learning curve that we have to undergo with our designers as we do need to do some due diligence. But I can tell you there's tremendous talent around the world. And of course, you're looking at a very loyal consumer, a consumer who has taken up these parameters of dressing for a much higher reason. And as a result, they're looking for products that suit these parameters. And of course, if you as a designer or the retailer win this consumer over, you have actually gotten a loyal customer for life. One of the ways that we build exposure for our designers is we've started building partnerships with fashion weeks around the world. We've just signed with Jakarta Fashion Week. In fact, I'm coming from there right now. We also are talking to New York Fashion Week. We've done something with Los Angeles Fashion Week, even South Africa. We are in discussions with the Mercedes-Benz Malaysia Fashion Week, Indonesia Fashion Week, and it goes on. We've got about 10 or 12 of them. And this is quite historical. It's never actually happened in the history of fashion before, where Islamic fashion has its own legitimate component within the fashion weeks, but we felt it was very necessary, and we went after it quite ambitiously so that we can provide the opportunities that mainstream fashion designers have. And it's been working out quite well, and we're very excited about the media attention our designers are getting as a result of it. And another program that we have is a Preda Cover program, which is a new store category that we've introduced, and we've been talking to all the major retailers around the world about it. So where you would have Pret-a-Porter for ready wear, couture for party wear, now you will hopefully be able to go to your favorite store and find a Preda Cover department for modest wear. And in that also opens up doors of opportunities for the multitude of designers around the world that deserve the break. And so thereby we create a lot of commercial opportunities and revenue streams for the designer as well as a retailer who gets to open up this new and attractive consumer traffic into their stores. And I'll leave that with you. We know that the iconic look always resembles the hijab. We know from the Grace Kelly days to Audrey Hepburn, and even today from Jennifer Lopez or Angelina Jolie, we know that this is a look that often becomes a style statement. And I think that those of us that cover for reasons other than just style realize that that there's also a contagious effect that people have when they see something so stylishly and so beautifully draped. And I think that's always a nice thing to be able to pass on to people. So with that, I'll please ask them to play a quick video, about 1.5 minutes, to just set the tone before I introduce the panelists. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like to now introduce our panelists, starting with Melanie Elturk, Dian Pelangi, and Zulfiye Tufa. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the panel, ladies. I believe you all have introductions and presentations, so I will hand you the clicker. We'll start with Melanie. If you can please start with your introduction, and if we can please have Melanie's presentation on the screen. Thank you.
My mic on. Assalamu alaikum. I come from the United States. My name is Melanie Elturk, like she said, and I am the CEO of a company called Haute Hijab. We're based in the US, and we sell hijabs and clothing designed by me, and we have a great team in the US, and so I am here today to speak with you all. I'm just waiting for my slides to come up. Great. Okay. So recently, I'm sure you guys all heard about this awesome H&M ad. Who here heard about what happened here? Okay. So recently we had Maria Idrisi. She was featured in this H&M ad, right, wearing a hijab. And Elle.com reached out to me to write about what this means for Muslim women. And while, Elle is a mainstream publication, it has a lot of implications. But for us as Muslim women in this context, the implications for us are far more meaningful. Now, first of all, let's talk about the mainstream fashion industry and their interest in Islamic fashion. So here you'll see an ad from DKNY, and I'm sure most of you or many of you have heard about their Ramadan campaign, and this is just an image from one of their campaigns. Now, here's where I stand and the message that I want to impart to you. We need to look at their motives. I think we can all agree it's very lucrative in nature. This business is a billion-dollar business. Number two, the narrative. Here you have, in big letters, head turners, which, is not exactly, the type of message that we'd want to put out. And number three, the imagery. So the actual images that are being used to promote this Islamic modest fashion. Now, what should we do about that? And the reason why these things are so important, and it's so important that we're taking note of the Islamic fashion designers and supporting them, is so that we can take back that narrative, or not necessarily take it back, but we can own it and claim it as our own, that narrative, those images, everything that the mainstream fashion industry would like us to have to adapt to. We need to claim that for ourselves, since after all, this is for us. So first and foremost, so what should we do? Number one, as designers, we all need to check our intentions and why we're doing this in the first place. For me personally, clearly and obviously, it's to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost, but number one is always to help my community and to instill self-confidence in hijab-wearing women, and that is the number one goal and vision, and it always has been, of my company. And it is far more important than the hijabs and the clothing that I design. It is the reason that I do what I do, and it is the reason I'll continue doing what I do. And even if I stop selling anything, I will continue to work for my community, and that's what this is about. And obviously, those mainstream fashion companies are not going to understand those nuances or how deeply rooted in faith this industry is. Secondly, the increased communication, and that was a phenomenal presentation by Alia. As the industry is small and developing, this council needs to act as an umbrella organization to connect all of the designers and the players in this space so that we can all help one another, collaborate, very much in line with what the Prime Minister was saying last night at the gala, if you had attended, this unification of all of us so that we can better serve our customer. And that goes along with the other 2 points, which is industry events, bridge building, building alliances, but also support from the global Islamic community. We need that support. Oftentimes, these companies, when we start off, they're very much in need of help and support, particularly financial support. It's what can take a small company, a kind of a mom and pop, if you will, and maybe they're making, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but that's what will propel them to that multi-million-dollar company with the support from the global Islamic community, particularly when it comes to finance. And finally, again, another point that was stressed last night at the gala, which is that of mentorship, promoting from within. We have to learn from our past experiences and mistakes and know that we need to help one another and raise each other up, bring each other in, and strengthen our community so that the next generation that can then come in and continue the work and continue doing what we do. So that's pretty much my stance and how I feel about the topic in a nutshell. And inshallah, I'll get to answer some more questions later.
Thank you, Melanie. Dian Pelangi, you have a presentation. Can we please have Dian's presentation up on the screen?
Assalamualaikum. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank you to come to the session, and I hope I can contribute to add inspirations and benefits to each other. And now I would like to talk about development of Islamic fashion industry in Indonesia. My name is Dian Pelangi. I'm a fashion designer from Indonesia, and I'm a fashion designer and creative director from Dian Pelangi Indonesia. I come from a background where Islamic veiling or modest fashion is one of the most thriving traits of globalization. It was never a tradition before, and the practice has only been dramatically increasing for the past 15 years. Can we have next?
Melanie, if you can please give the clicker
I'm so
to
sorry.
Dian, and we're trying to get the presentation up. Sorry, 1 second.
Okay, I'm gonna wait for the presentation first.
Can we please get Dian Pelangi's presentation up on the screen? Okay, while we're waiting, I think what I'll do is I'll ask Melanie a couple of questions. Melanie, thank you for your
Sure.
presentation. And I'd like to include you two ladies as well. And as soon as we see Dian's presentation up, we'll resume with your presentation, Dian. Melanie, I think that you've actually raised a couple of very interesting topics, and we are beginning the discussions with such things, and I think it's a very important platform. What, in your opinion, are the winning ingredients to this industry? I hope we've learned a lot of lessons from mainstream that are good and maybe not so good for the fashion industry. What are your thoughts on that?
There are a lot of ingredients. Obviously, you need to have a great design, right? But in addition to that, it's the professionalism that unfortunately us. Do you want to go ahead with Dian, or should I
Go ahead and
continue?
finish your thought, and then we'll
Okay.
go on with Dian.
Okay, so it's the professionalism that us, unfortunately, as a Muslim community, we suffer with. And it's really sad because I wish that we held ourselves to a greater standard, not only in the way that we deal with our customers and with each other, but also even in the presentation of our clothing, the way it's made, the fabrics we use. We need to really raise the bar. And if we think that this subpar designing that we've all kind of acclimated and gotten used to is going to compete against these huge mainstream industries that are going to come in and try and swoop up this space, we're kidding ourselves. So we really need to professionalize this space. And at the same time, we need to garner a very, very strong connection with our customers and our audience and our followers. That's the only, especially in this day and age when, there are so many things that are competing for our attention, particularly within the fashion space. So it's so important to create a strong bond.
Okay, great. Dian, if you can go ahead and finish your presentation.
Okay.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you so much. Firstly, I come from a background where Islamic veiling or modest fashion is one of the most thriving traits of globalization. It was never a tradition before, and the practice has only been dramatically increasing for the past 15 years. Now, in the second decade, we have passed the euphoria of hijab donning. Before, it was about an unstoppable exploration of styling, colors, and motifs. Every single day, everybody wants to look outstanding in their hijab styles, because at the same time, they want to challenge the negativity stereotypes on unveiling. As you can see in the screen, it's what's trending in fashion, in the modest fashion right now. Now, these people focus more on the practical function and its flexibility. When seeking for daily Muslim attires, they want something that completely accommodates their dense activities as modern city dwellers. So I think minimalist and simple designs are the key for the next trends, with more toned down shades of colors in terms of aesthetics and couture. I think Islamic fashion is undergoing new adjustment in a global market, and what is apparent in this adjustment is a re-articulation of global and local trends, which often involves a strong component of reinvention. This also becomes the basis for the upcoming trends that require a creative mingling of style with Western, Eastern, and Islamic vibes, which, when combined, seem to defy the boundaries of each category, suggesting some sort of new transnationally oriented fashion. Because this flexibility and transnationality, Islamic fashion is now put on par with the mainstream fashion. Now the competition is real, and there are a lot of opportunities for Islamic fashion designers to go international. For example, we have Asya AKF, a Muslim fashion blogger from Kuwait. Now she's working with many international labels such as Dior, Ralph Lauren, and other brands. Maria Idrisi from the UK is working as a model for H&M. Hana Tajima from Japan collaborates with Uniqlo, and even a prestigious fashion magazine from the UK, Business of Fashion, puts an eye on Islamic fashion industry and features me as one of the 500 most influential people shaping the global fashion industry. Thank you. In regards to the market, Indonesian Muslim consumers' landscape and development has been one of the most studied objects in economics. A lot of theories are put on the table, but I think the most interesting one is the 4 types of consumers put forward by Yuswo Hadi, a Muslim economy observer. As you can see on the screen, I think these 4 markets is what's on our society now. The downside is the spiritual value, and the upside is the worldly emotional value. So there's 4 markets, I think. The first one is apathies, the second one is conformist, the third one is rationalist, and the fourth is universalist. If someone is low on the spiritual value and the worldly or emotional value, it makes someone an apathist. And if someone is high in the spiritual value and low in the emotional or worldly, it makes them a conformist. They claim that everything must be Islamic. And then if someone is high in the worldly or emotional value and low in the spiritual value, it makes someone irrationally. And they always aim on what do I get in everything. And then universalist is the last one. It's high in the world or emotional value and spiritual value. And what they think is Islamic lifestyle is better, is more important. He categorized Muslim consumer based on their religiosity, educational, cultural, and financial backgrounds. They are rationalists, apatheists, universalists, and conformists. Despite the different dose on each aspect, their consumption mode is all linked with the lifestyle trends after the Reform era, which are dominated with Islamic values and increased knowledgeability driven by the internet. These 4 types have been the new point of view in analyzing the Indonesian market, and from there, he points out that in order for businesses to survive in this new market is to build sense of community and a brand persona to connect the brand to the customer's heart and be inclusive and universal, and be different and authentic. I think this can be applied to the new global market as well. How is the Islamic modest fashion industry looking like these days? I think it is growing really fast and getting more competitive. It's get promising demands not only from the Muslim communities, but also the non-Muslim. Getting modest garments now is also easier than before. This is not only because the mainstream labels have started to build a modest subline for this market, but also the consumers are knowledgeable and tech-savvy. As I have observed lately, I realize young Muslim girls in every part of the world really know where and how to seek out garments which can be made compatible with Islamic values, even if it's not an especially modest or Muslim label. Not only do they get inspiration from what they see worn by other Muslim in cosmopolitan cities, but they can also glean ideas and advices from rapidly expanding Muslim media.
Okay.
So,
Oh, sorry, go ahead, finish your thought.
okay, so our challenge today is bigger than ever and exciting too, since the customers are getting more and more well-informed. So resilience in this case is something that needs careful planning. It might take a long time, it's not easy, but it's worth it. And we have to encourage the next generation to keep working and inventing new ideas and push them to be as eager as us. I think that's the end of my session. Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much. It's a great presentation, Dian. Let's give her a hand. And if I can please ask for Zulfiye's presentation to be up while I ask Dian a question. Dian, you talk about the universalist who says the Islamic way is better. When you talk about your particular fashions and your consumer base, is that who you're targeting? Can you define your consumer profile?
Yes, actually, universalist is one. It's actually it's also, I think it's a way to how describe myself. Yes, we think that Islam is more important, and if there's a way that if it's Islamic, that we can choose that way. But you know, it's a more modern, and then a mix of culture, and then they're also their mindset is different, and then they always follow the trend and
okay.
modern.
And that's very important. And we'll talk about the critics, because we can't get through this talk without talking about the critics of what's happening with today's modest fashion. Some feel it's too flashy, it's too fashionable, it's too colorful, and that's valid too. And I think that we need to hear that as well. Zulfiye, you have a presentation. Zulfiye Tufa, yes. If you can introduce yourself, and if we can please, Dian, if you can just give your clicker to Zulfiye, please. Wonderful. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, hello and salam alaikum. My name is Zulfiye and I'm a blogger and fashion designer from Australia. So today what I wanted to speak to you about was mainly my experience as someone who lives in a Western country, and my experience and generally how it is with modest fashion. So being here in Malaysia and also in Indonesia, the fashion industry in terms of modesty is booming. It's huge and it's growing exponentially. And I sort of wanted to approach you with a question actually to start off and say, which part of the world spends the most money on modest fashion? Can anyone yell out an answer to me? If you're wrong, it doesn't matter, that's fine. America? Okay. So interestingly enough, it's actually Turkey. Turkey spends the most on modest fashion. And they do a lot of manufacturing there. But the thing that I found really interesting when looking into this was I actually thought it was Indonesia and Malaysia and those countries, but it's actually after Turkey, it's actually the Muslims living as minorities in Western countries. So that includes the US, the UK, Australia, and some parts of Europe. So they spend over $22 billion, which is the next in line after Turkey. And so if you look at the whole modest fashion industry, at the moment it's approaching almost $300 billion. And within the next few years it's expected to reach about $500 billion. And so a large majority of that is from Muslims living in Western countries. So in terms of what opportunities this creates for people, I think there's a lot of opportunities in Western countries because the market is not saturated there at all. In fact, it's quite the contrary. It's very hard to find modest clothing. And I think that's why more and more people are drawn towards it. Not only that, but your identity is called into question every single day if someone knows that you're a Muslim. And if you are wearing a hijab, which is a large part of modesty, then you'll obviously be known as a Muslim. And one of the reasons why there's so much opportunity is because people, when they're associated with being a Muslim, they want it to be in a positive light, not with the negativity that's normally associated with it. And I think another really big thing about the modest fashion industry in the West and an opportunity that it provides is that it can actually bridge gaps between the people, the Muslims, and those of other faith backgrounds in those countries. So for example, in Australia, if someone sees you with a headscarf, they automatically know that you're a Muslim, and the way that you're dressed can really affect the way that that interaction takes place. And I have people coming up to me, if I'm wearing like a brightly coloured scarf, I often get people coming and saying, wow, that's such a beautiful fabric on your head. So I think even at a grassroots level, modest fashion is definitely something that bridges gaps between us. In terms of the challenges that we face, I think that one of the things is that the prospects are very limited. So the want is there. So people want to do something about it. But because the Muslims are a minority and the most influential people in the fashion industry are not Muslim, it's very hard to actually get them on board with what you're doing and to get into places that are influential. Whereas in other countries where Muslims are a majority, let's take Malaysia for an example. So even like at one stage when modest fashion wasn't the in thing, a lot of people who were creating the fashion were Muslims anyway, but they weren't necessarily creating it in a modest way. So I think when the desire was there for the modest clothing, people were like, okay, yeah, let's get onto this, let's jump on board. Whereas in a Western country, it's very strange, that's very different. We don't know if we want to go there or not, and be associated with Muslims. The second thing is that I think it's really important for people who actually live in Muslim majority countries to reach out to Muslims in the West and actually create clothing or create connections and relationships with them for them to be able to prosper in this industry. So that brings me to the end of the talk. If you have any questions.
Thank you so much,
No worries.
Zulfiye. I'd like to open up a question starting with you, Zulfiye, please. That was a great presentation. Thank you, very informative. And I think it's very important for us to first establish what we know of the consumer. At the council, what we know is that they don't necessarily like to follow trends. They're not into what's this season, what's last season. That kind of lingo doesn't really stick with them so well. They're into what appeals to them individually, and it's about what fits within their parameters. Now, I'm going to ask all of you about this. Is that your experience in your space in the modest fashion industry? And how do you address questions like what's going to happen next season? Dian touched on it, and I'm going to talk to you about that as well. But Zulfiye, what's your opinion about that?
Okay. So currently, I think speaking about people who actually wear the clothing, so that's how I'll probably approach this one. In terms of following, like not really following trends, I think there's this quote that I don't know who started this, but it's going around everywhere. Like you can't buy style, but you can buy fashion, right? So no one can buy. So everyone wants to have a really nice style, and so that's true. So people don't like to go quote unquote for something that's very like in fashion, but usually what they do is they definitely do want to keep up with trends. So they'll take that item and somehow work it in a way that is individualized for them. So I still do think that Muslims, especially in the West, are very much want to be on trend with what's going on, because I think that's got a huge, it really affects how people feel, whether they feel comfortable or whether they feel like they look like the people that they're with. So I do think that people do like to follow trends, but style it to something that reflects who they are and personalize it.
Okay, so Dian, you predicted that the next wave that we're going to see is more simple. It's going to be more sort of basics. The colors are going to be more subtle. So who decides that, and how did you come up with that?
Actually, that idea comes from what I saw from the Fashion Week and from the designers, from the influencers like fashion bloggers or celebrities as well. The trend is moving forward. But as we know that if someone using that items or that trends, if everyone using it, so it will be changed to the next trend. So I think it's the designers, the influencer, and the celebrities and the bloggers' job to decide the trends.
Okay, so Melanie, some people agree and some people disagree, right? Because some people say that this is a very powerful consumer with a voice, and now with social media, they're speaking their mind and they're saying what they like and don't like about the fashion business, and especially what their demands are for fashion. Now, you had said in your presentation that this is a space that is for a specific audience, and so we need to protect it, and we need to be very mindful of how we're going to service that audience, right? Which is a very valid concern. But there's a lot of influences that come from the non-modest audience or the mainstream audience. And at the same time, there's a very strong secondary market that's in the mainstream space. So don't you have a responsibility to still acknowledge that secondary market and service them as well as your immediate market, which is the Islamic fashion consumer?
Well, my first and foremost responsibility is toward the Muslim consumer, and being very cognizant of the fact that in my brand name is the word hijab, and so it is very, very clear and obvious who my consumer is. Do we have non-Muslim shopping at Noor Hijab? Yes, we do, and I think that's fantastic and it's phenomenal. But I want them to know what we're about, what this is for, where are you, what is this? So I don't, to be honest with you, I don't feel that I have a real responsibility to the mainstream market. I think it's phenomenal, and I welcome them with open arms. But my first and foremost responsibility is to the Muslim consumer.
Okay, all right. So Arundhati Roy, human rights activist and author, said that coercing a woman out of a burqa is as bad as coercing her into one. So basically, everything is about the woman's choice at the end of the day, and we all know that there's no compulsion in religion. And so she suggests, let's create situations where a woman can choose. Now, this sort of touches upon certain pressures, I think, that you as industry players would feel in the Western markets. There's a lot of judgment that goes on in maybe places like France, Germany, or some of the European countries where they look at the hijab and they look at it as a woman being forced to wear one, and therefore she's oppressed. Have you come across this in your line of work? We'll start with Dian. And if so, how do you handle that?
Okay, I think it's all based on the interpretation. Like if someone told you that you should cover your head or cover your body, some of them are saying I'm covering my body, but I shouldn't cover my hair. So it's based, back to the person, back to their interpretation and how they feel comfort about it. So they have their own definition of covering the aura. But I think we still look for the best way to describe modest fashion as well.
Okay, how about you, Zulfiye? What kind of socio or political pressures do you feel being in your line of work? Do you come across this?
Yeah, so I do find that people often have an expectation or think that they can actually weigh in on how women are dressing and like specifically and target people and say, you're not dressing to my standard, you're not dressing like a Muslim or as a good Muslim. And I find that that's one of the things that happen the most. And it's really important just to always remember and realize that for me, you know, these days, dressing modestly and wearing a hijab, it's become this, when you wear a hijab, it's no longer about like, in terms of the way you do it, but even if you have half of your hair showing or if you have your neck showing or things that are deemed controversial, you, at the end of the day, you have something on your head that signifies you as a Muslim. That in itself is not easy to do in this day and age. So, and I think that we need to be like held in high esteem for doing that, you know, but we're not. We're just brought down because it's not good enough.
So Melanie, is the pressure...
Thank you.
Good. Great comment. Melanie, is the pressure more Muslims on Muslims, or is it more from the Western or the external, sort of the mainstream pressure that comes into the Muslim space?
Of course it's Muslim on Muslim, unfortunately. And I echo Zulfiye's comments, but for me personally, as a designer and somebody who does have a real responsibility, I do have a very real societal pressure to make sure that not only are the clothes that I'm designing appropriate, but that the images that I'm putting out and the narrative I'm putting out is appropriate, because at the end of the day, I'm going to be the one that is held responsible for that. Can I control how my consumers wear the clothing or the hijabs? Of course not. But I have to be really responsible about the way I choose to clothe the models, for example. So for me, the responsibility is very real, but I wish that we as a community could come together and lift each other up more than bring each other down, because that's really choking us as a community, not only in fashion, but in general, this judgment that we pass on to others before we look to ourselves, unfortunately.
That's a very good point, and I think that's valid. Yes, and I think one of the criticisms that we all hear, which is from the Muslim community, is that it's getting too flashy, guys. That's what we're hearing when the critics do have a voice, when they want to say something. It's getting too flashy, it's too colorful, and it's drawing too much attention to yourself. What do you guys have to say to that? Dian, what's your answer? Because sometimes your fashions tend to be quite bright and flashy,
Yes,
like the outfit that you're wearing today is beautiful. But would you feel that the critics would say something about that?
I think it's also based on the culture. I born and raised in Indonesia, where you can find a lot of fabrics with multicultural fabrics, and then colors, and then you can find maybe you know batik and tie-dye or something. It's also based on the culture. So fashion grows with culture as well. And then I think something interesting or something attractive is also people's interpretation. You can also find me. Maybe if I was in the wearing something like this in Europe or in the UK or in the US or in Indonesia, they don't find it attractive. But we can make the opposite if there is some people wear abaya or everything's in black color, or they wear a head cover as well, a face, they cover their face as well, and they're walking in the US or in the Europe, people also find it attractive, right? So I think it's based on the interpretation as well.
Melanie, is it too flashy?
Well, what I have to say is that there's a difference between negative attention and positive attention. Of course, we're garnering attention to ourselves. We have a piece of cloth on our head. In the US, in the Western context, people are going to look at us no matter what. But is the attention that we are bringing to ourselves positive or not? Which means, are we approachable? Are we presentable? Which is something that our dean teaches us to be. Are we presenting ourselves in the right manner? So whether that's wearing a brightly colored hijab in the context of the West, where that's commonplace, or a long abaya in the Khalij, where that's also commonplace. We have to look at the context and also the positive image that we're putting out versus a negative one.
Okay, that's a very valid point. And I'm ready to take questions from the audience anytime, so please, if you guys can, the people with the mic can please go to the gentleman in the back. Okay, and Zulfiye, while we're waiting for that, can you address this, please, about what you come across?
Yep, so I definitely think that there is nothing wrong with attention, but it depends on the type of attention that you were saying, Melanie. And often I feel like growing up as a Muslim, sometimes it's very cultural for a woman to not have any attention, even if there's nothing wrong with that attention, right? So I think that's, we need to sort of think about what sort of attention, and also, is attention necessarily bad, depending on what type of attention it is.
Okay, can we have our first question, please? Yes.
I'm Yunus Ali. I teach at Monash University, Malaysia campus. My point is for Zulfiye and Melanie. You are from non-Muslim majority country, and I think you have a significant challenge. Both of you mentioned that its fashion is a trend. But Zulfiye mentioned that Turkey is the most important and the highest percentage of user of modest dress. That's right. It was not there few years ago, but the designer turned that into that situation. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there are a lot of literature how it has been turned up. Because Turkey is the liberal country, but it is now more toward that. My point is,
yes.
What percentage of your age in US and in Australia, Muslims migrated, because they are going into the new country, and are they going to the current trend or still maintaining or accepting the Islamic modest trend?
All right, thank you so much. If you can please take the mic to the next question while we answer this question. So it's for Melanie and Zulfiye. What do you see when Muslims go to your Western countries? Are they assimilating to the Western style, or do you feel that they're even holding on tighter to their own parameters? Go ahead, Melanie.
Well, speaking as a first-generation immigrant child, we adhere to the culture of the place we're in, which is America. And I highly define my culture as an American. And so I dress like an American. I just have to kind of change, a few things here and there. And I would say that the vast majority of my peers in America are the same way.
But you mean they still wear the scarf and they still obviously dress not so loosely and, I mean, they loose clothing and all.
Well, what I'm saying is that they're wearing American clothing versus traditional clothing.
Okay.
Whether they choose to wear the scarf or not, whether they choose to cover properly or not, they're wearing American clothing. You're going to see that 99% of the time versus them coming and wearing shalwar kameez, for example, or abaya. You're pretty much going to, you're going to strip that when...
And I guess they would argue that the reason they do that is because the shalwar kameez or the abaya is going to cause more attention to them, and they probably just want their own privacy as well. They don't need to be an emblem or a symbol of any type of a message. So I believe, in my opinion, that would be fair. Zulfiye, what's your opinion?
So regarding actually dressing modestly, so not following the trends of the country, but whether you wear a hijab or how much you cover, I think that it's really split. So you asked for a statistic, I can't tell you that. But from my experiences, some women feel like being in a country that challenges them, they want to wear it, and then they'll even try harder and all sorts of things to really push that agenda of I want to be who I am, regardless of what you say. But then there are also a lot of women who not only don't dress modestly or take off their hijabs because they feel like people are putting pressure on them, but they also feel like the Muslim community is putting pressure on them to dress. And if it's not up to scratch, then they're like, well, I won't wear it anyway because everyone's giving me a hard time.
Right. Okay. Can we have the next question? Yes, please. Go ahead. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I'm Mir Sadi from Bangladesh.
Okay.
My question to Honorable Moderator Alia Khan. Thanks and congratulations to you that you have established Islamic Fashion and Design Council. I think it's a pioneer in Islamic design. My question is, what is the purpose of this design? Is it the only business, which is now billion-dollar business, or Islamic way, which Allah suggests us or order us? I mean, your target is only worldly materials, or you want to achieve the real Islamic way? I mean, that is not billion or trillion, it's infinity. So do you have any Sharia expert, or do you have any Sharia consultant while you go promotion in Fashion Week or in fashion designings?
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. I always say the Islamic Fashion and Design Council is not a religious organization. And I think it's very important for that pressure to be off of even our designers, our industry players, and the people generally in the business. Because like Melanie said, they can make the clothes, but they can't tell you how to wear it. The same scarf that Melanie or Zulfiye or Dian make can very much be used on the head as it can be used as a sarong on the beach. So that's not their responsibility. Their desire is to make great, modest clothing. Now, we don't try to be the Sharia fatwas or the authorities on how that should be administered. However, we do realize that the designers do understand the general parameters that clothing must be made in a certain way. It should be full length. It should not be too tight. All that is there. Now, how the consumer chooses to administer that cannot be put on anyone's responsibility. All of our responsibilities are direct with God. They are not through each other. So the Islamic Fashion and Design Council is there, yes, to help the opportunities manifest in a commercial way, absolutely.
So how can I get involved with fashion designer, because they is all commercial side of.
Okay, Dian, can you answer that question? How can you involve others? How can you basically be a leader and a mentor? Yes.
I think we can start with the influencer. Right now we should maintain our social media very well because that's one of the power of Muslim fashion. modest fashion, and I think we should start like giving an endorsement to the celebrities or influencer or blogger. It makes the reputation of the label higher, and then from then you can encourage the fashion designer to join as well, and then maybe if they are all already gathered together, and then you can plan for something forward, like for the society, more to the social side or CSR side.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take one last question right here in the front row with the red hijab. And before I do, I just want to real quick, maybe you guys, 10 seconds each. Now, the brother had mentioned that there's a big sort of commercial viability that everybody keeps talking about with the Islamic fashion and the modest wear industry. Do your sales reflect those huge numbers that we're seeing in the reports? Melanie?
Yes, alhamdulillah, we've been seeing year over year an incredible growth, and there is a clear need, like Zulfiye said, in the West. In the US, it's just hard to find hijabs, and it's hard to find appropriate clothing, particularly for formal wear and things of that nature. So yes.
Thank you. Dian, are your sales reflecting the big numbers that the reports are talking about for the industry?
Yes, of course. We used to have 4 outlets in Indonesia. Right now, it's 14 outlets and 1 in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur. I think it reflects. I think it's described more. And then also for the fashion week, right now, it's more open to the fashion, modest fashion industry.
Lovely. Zulfiye?
So I'm actually working on my label at the moment. When it comes out, I'll get back to you.
Okay. Last question, and then we have to call it a wrap. Please go ahead.
Okay, my name is Fatma, and I am from Nairobi, Kenya. I just wanted to congratulate you ladies. This is a wonderful presentation. And I must say that what you're doing is actually helping the Muslim identify herself. For example, the way I'm dressed today, I don't feel I'm special. But when I dress the way you ladies are dressed in an Islamic fashion, I feel that I am saying something without necessarily saying something. So what does this do? It actually encourages the young, our daughters, the Muslim girl, to aspire to be something at the same time without having to shed off her faith, really. So it helps. It also helps our sisters who are not Muslims appreciate us for who we are.
Absolutely.
You know? So that develops us, and I believe you need a clap on that. They do. I would also say that there is a place for people like Dina's fashion. I mean, it's gorgeous. And there is a place for Zulfiya's. What I would recommend is for people who are not in Dubai, not in Australia, not in the US, maybe you could create a platform where we could order, and that would be the universality of your fashion, and at the same time influence the world over, because Muslims are all over now.
Thank you so much. We're running out of time. That's a very good comment, and actually I'm sorry, I know I see a few hands going up. I'm so sorry, I can't take any more questions. We've run out of time, but that's a very good point, and I'd like to close up with this. You know, we can look at it 2 ways. We can criticize it and say it's getting too flashy and there's just too much going on and too many colors, whatever. Or we can say this is actually encouraging our ladies to be more dignified whilst they wear their hijab, because it's a big struggle for women, especially that go to the West and have to cause so much attention to themselves. I think it helps them when they can be a little bit more stylish so that they can keep the hijab on. And I know that that's been the case in many Western countries. So that deserves recognition. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the panelists.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. And they're available after this discussion for any questions. Thank you.